In a heartbreaking situation, reports have it that 1,000 Kenyans, mostly young men, looking for a better life, were lured to Russia under false pretenses. Now, they were promised high-paying jobs in fields like construction or security, but once they arrived, they were forced to sign contracts in a language they did not understand. So instead of working in a trade, they were sent to the front lines of the war in Ukraine with almost no training, essentially being used as cannon fodder in a conflict that is not theirs. Now, the Kenyan government is now scrambling to deal with the fallout as dozens of these citizens are reported dead, missing, or even stuck in hospitals. It turns out that many were smuggled out of Nairobi on tourist visas through shady recruitment agencies that bypassed official channels. Kenya is now demanding answers from Moscow and cracking down on these local recruiters to stop more people from being tricked into a trap that they might never return from. Now, joining us to speak on this, we have Dr. Abubakar Mohammed Sani, a research fellow, Department of Military Studies, Abuja Leadership Center, and his location is Borno State. Thank you so much, Dr. Sani, for joining us. Well, we also have Obinna Ejanya, CEO, 9 Communications Limited. He's in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us once again.
My pleasure to be back.
It's a pleasure. So let me begin with you, Obin, now. Let's hear your thoughts on this, because the Joint Intelligence Report suggests that over 1,000 Kenyans, not just Kenyans, but we're sticking to them now, have actually been funneled into this conflict. How did a mobilization of 1,000 plus individuals bypass the National Intelligence Service domestic surveillance net? Is this an issue of poor signals, poor signals to intelligence, or a total failure in human intelligence within a high-risk recruitment hubs?
Yeah, this is an obvious case of institutional compromise when the system is dealing with failures. And we're talking of Kenyans, and we're saying 1,000 Kenyans are estimated to be fighting in Russia. But according to a report that I also saw, about 36 other African countries are also victims of this syndrome. So we're looking at 1,000 documented Kenyans. So you can imagine, and I can tell you for sure, that there will be some individuals also from Nigeria, from West Africa, that are involved. So we see Kenya is bordering Uganda, so there will be a lot of Ugandans involved. So this is a continental epidemic that involves a lot of Africans that are taken advantage of. I think because of a failed economic situation in Africa, so Russia and of course Ukraine as well, they are taking advantage, exploiting the vulnerability of economic hardship that's prevalent in Africa. So this is a sudden situation.
All right, now let's hear the thoughts of Dr. Sani as well on this.
Good evening, Nigerians. I must begin by saying I agree with the submission made by Ega that not just Kenyans, about 36 other sub-Saharan African countries' nationals are involved in it. And to be precise, somehow, there must be some Nigerians in it. But to me, I think it has to do with fundamental human rights. It is not a crime for anybody to say he is going to Russia or to Ukraine or to America or to UK to go join the armed forces there and then fight for them. In any case, Nigerians have been going to America, and sometimes you even see big celebrities celebrating it as an achievement, that their daughter or their son is now part of the American this or whatever. But I have some reservation with this thing, because the people who went to Russia, they went there, on false pretense. They were told that they will be given jobs in certain things, that has nothing to do with any arms engagement. On going there, it was another thing entirely different. And they were forced to, sign documents that they cannot even understand the language, or read the script that, the document, the agreement was written in. And they were conscripted by force, to act as, soldiers to fight to defend the cause of Russians. That's just my worry with that. In any case, here in Africa, I just made a rough calculation and realized that the entire military strength, the numerical military strength of the African continent is less than 5 million in a continent of about 1.4, 1.5 billion people. So even Africa as a continent, we are undermanned, you understand? But because of bad governance is the major reason why young men, able-bodied men are running to Europe, running to Russia, running to even the Arabian countries to go and do whatever kind of work they can get to take care of their families. So to me, I think this is a clarion call that our government in Africa have paid. We must come back and begin to address the issues of good governance in such a way that our own environment, our country, will be conducive for our people to stay here and earn a decent living.
Okay. Now, I'm told we have Singo here with us, Singo Mwachofi, his Deputy Director, Security Research and Information Center in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us at this time, sir.
Thank you too. Thank you too. I'm happy to be here.
All right, let's also hear from you, because we're hearing reports of these men, of these men being signed, or let's just say being promised jobs as electricians and security guards, only to end up in trenches. Now, under international human law, do these individuals qualify as mercenaries, or does the evidence of deceptive recruitment and coercive contracts reclassify this as a transnational human trafficking operation?
I would classify it as the latter. I wouldn't classify them as mercenaries. I would see them as victims of human trafficking, because from what we hear, many of them were promised jobs, decent jobs. Some have been promised those jobs in the Middle East, so they go to the Middle East. Then once they get there, the promises change that they will now go to Russia, and then many of them are trained security people. Some were in the police, ex-military, and then once they get to Russia, they find that they are being recruited to fight, and enticed with the promise of big salaries and bonuses and incentives. And the truth is that many of them need this money and these bonuses. So they end up then finding that the jobs they were promised, they were being recruited for, are not the same. And so, they are victims of human trafficking, I would say.
Okay. Now, still on you, Singo. The report notes that many of these people signed contracts in Russian, which is a language they do not speak. So what should be the Kenyan government's legal standing to challenge the validity of these contracts that were signed in a language, that the signees do not speak? And is there a viable path to invoke the right of protection to nullify these agreements on a global stage?
Absolutely, there is. And when the government issued its statement, I think last week, to Parliament, government itself seemed to appear very concerned about the new developments, about these recruitments. And so if it is true that these contracts are in Russian, then it means that those that have been recruited have been duped. They have been recruited into jobs whose terms they do not understand. And it also has diplomatic implications, because it's a question also of to what extent is the Russian are the Russian authorities aware of this? Is the Russian government involved? Of course, its embassy officials here in Kenya denied. They said that Russia has not been involved in any illegal recruitment. And so, it then remains, if it is true they are not involved, it then remains a matter that the Kenyan government would have legal standing in saying, look, these contracts are illegal.
All right, now let's come back to you, Obinna. Obinna, regarding reports of compromised officials at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Does this suggest isolated insider threats or more systemic state capture, where human smuggling rings have successfully integrated into the state's border security apparatus?
Yes, it's not strange to hear of the compromise of the system.
Yeah.
We're in Africa, looking at Kenya. Kenya does not stand so far away different from Nigerian system. So we know that because of the failures, institutional failures, a lot of things that shouldn't happen in Africa. So it's not strange, or it's not a shock for me to hear that the airport security system are porous, and the people are able to smuggle or traffic individuals far away to a suicide mission in Russia. So because like the other gentleman said, there is no way these young people will deliberately get ready to travel to Russia to be in the front line to fight against Ukraine if they were not coerced or cajoled or deceived into such mission. So it is, and even if there's a document that is signed, that document stands null and void by law, because there is no circumstance that people from Africa will just deliberately, happily volunteer to fight such a war. And they will be put in a place where obviously they won't be able to come out except they are dead. So these are just choices that people made out of desperation, because they are left without any other choice or decision to make. So obviously they will be promised to have one job or the other, and by the time they calculate the exchange rate in Kenyan shillings, it's very enticing. And so even if I'm driving truck, even if whatever I'm doing and I'm making this money to help my families who are impoverished, so they go there only for them to be sent to their gallows. So we blame the system, we blame the institutional system, the failures. So if Russian embassy or government, even back in Russia, is denying that they're not in collusion, they do not know what is going on, is a blatant lie, because there's no way someone will be issued a Russian visa without clarifications.
Now, let's come back to Dr. Sani. Obina has actually said that there's no way that the Russian government will say they have no idea of what is going on. Now, given the recruits utilized transit hubs like Istanbul and Abu Dhabi, to what extent did the breakdown in regional intelligence sharing allow for the exploitation of tourist visa loopholes for combat-related transit?
Russia has some sympathies across the world. You take countries, for instance, like Iran, even Turkey, and even the United Arab Emirates. These are countries that, the world is becoming multipolar, and some of them tend to side with the Russian line of thought. You can see what is happening in Sudan, how the country has been divided, Egypt and Co are one side, another group of Christians, are with the other. So I believe it's a global network, it's a syndicate that, all the record, they know what is happening, and they are made up their mind to help the Russians, get manpower to prosecute the war. That's the side. I want to slightly disagree with the notion that some of these very people do not know that they are being shipped to Russia to fight. There might be many who clearly don't have the interest or the intention of going to either Russia or Ukraine to fight. But I can tell you Here in Nairobi, where I am, I've seen instances where young men will just disappear and they will tell you they are either going to Sudan or to God knows wherever to go and fight. Why? Because they need money. And our people, most of our people have this inferiority complex. To them, if you go to the white man's land, wear his military uniform, then fight with him, then get better paid. Why not? That's why I said earlier during my submission that my own grounds with this problem is people were deceived, were lured into, something else, and they found themselves, acting as soldiers. That's just where I have the reservation with that. But I can tell you some Africans, because our systems have collapsed, governance is not working, there are no jobs. People just don't want to go out anywhere and then earn a living and then come back and show that they have made it. That's just my opinion.
Okay, with 28 Kenyans currently missing and at least one confirmed dead, and in the absence of a formal status of forces agreement, what are the established protocols or lack thereof, for verifying missing in actions and also conducting body recovery within a contested high-intensity conflict zone where Kenya has no official footprint? And this is to you, Singo.
We heard the Kenyan foreign minister said that Honorable Musalia Mudavadi that he's planning to make an official trip to Russia to meet with the Russian authorities in Moscow to discuss this issue. So it would then be assumed that once he meets with Russian officials and makes the Kenya's case about the concern of the Kenyan state about its citizens fighting in the Russian front lines, that then perhaps it now becomes a matter to be handled between both countries. Maybe the Russian authorities will be able to facilitate and support Kenya's quest to retrieve its citizens. If it is true that Moscow is not involved in the recruitment, and if they are involved in the recruitment, then perhaps that visit by the Minister of Foreign Affairs should be able to chart a way forward.
Okay, but then how can the Foreign Minister Mudavadi leverage non-alignment to secure the release of these citizens without providing Russia with a diplomatic win, or even conversely, triggering a full-scale rupture in bilateral relations?
Well, that remains to be seen. It's a delicate balance, and I think it does also point to wider problems that the previous speaker was alluding to. Given that we know now that the Kenyan government has expressed its concern about its citizens illegally recruited and are fighting in the Russian war with Ukraine, the Russian embassy in Nairobi has denied that the Russian government is involved in illegal recruitment. That's a position now. And now we know that the Kenyan authorities are planning for the foreign minister to visit Moscow to discuss the issues. So it does point to this wider socio-economic and political problem of, number one, massive unemployment, where citizens really have no recourse. They will grab at anything that is available for them to survive on, and therefore if they are lured, they will go. It points to massive corruption networks, because we heard from that intelligence report that there is collusion between diplomatic officials in the Kenyan and in the Nairobi and Moscow commissions, and we have also airport officials and immigration officials involved. Then it also points to this international wave of organized crime and institutional malaise, where institutions created to prevent these kind of actions are not functional. So in the midst of all this, it's really bigger problems that have to be resolved, to be tackled in those conversations between the officials in Moscow and those in Kenya, if they do sit down and talk.
All right, now it's one thing to actually fight for, to be tricked into fighting for Russia, and yet it is another thing, that Russia is being accused of using these fighters as cannon fodder. This is for you, Obinna. Is there any, proof or casualty data indicating that Kenyan recruits are being integrated into regular Russian units, or are they being deployed as expendable assets in high attrition gray zone areas similar to the Storm-Z formations?
Yes, of course. There's no way Russians will be giving an open arm to get these Africans into the Russian system to their own advantage, to the advantage of the Africans, I mean. It must be to the detriment of the Africans. As you can see, that the sentiment of, I wouldn't use the word Western countries or Europeans or foreigners, I would say, who are not Africans. The sentiment is that people of African descent are people who can be used for dirty jobs. So these are the sentiments that has been in existence for hundreds of years. As you can bear witness, in history, we didn't know when it happened, but it's still in history, so it happened during the slave trade, where Africans are taken to some foreign countries to be used as a tool, as a labor tool, not even as a human force, So these are still the same sentiment. When these Russians know that if they want to engage Ukraine on a foot battle, ground battle, they'll be killed in dozens. So they wouldn't be happy losing their own citizens. This is why they decide to, okay, let's just shop for some people that we can, use as, even if they are being killed, it's not our own citizens. Because of course, there will be a political sentiment in Russia. If Russian citizens are dying in droves, that will create serious political chaos in Russia for Putin. So the solution is look somewhere else for people who are gullible and take advantage of that. Like my fellow Kenyan guy said, there is abject poverty in Africa. I'm surprised that Kenya has joined. I was expecting Kenya to be different, but there's been a systemic failure as well in Kenya, and the economy is so bastardized and people are suffering. So people do not have option than to take the way of death. So that is the situation. These people are put in places that ordinary Russians wouldn't be. And they're not, like you asked, they're not enrolled into a Russian, military system. They are just being used as illegal mercenaries, so to say.
All right, now coming back to you, Dr. Sani, while we have your final thoughts, we've actually seen similar patterns with recruits from India and Nepal. So do the similarities between the Kenyan, Indian, and Nepalese recruitment patterns, does it suggest a coordinated Russian strategy to outsource its domestic mobilization crisis to the global south? If so, what is the collective counter strategy? For
this very question, I think the collective counter strategy to me is not something that has to do with rocket science. It's very simple. You see, countries that have high development index, good governance, and things like that. For instance, I give you an example. Take Seychelles, take Botswana. Just here in Africa, among the 52 countries we have in Africa, I can bet you will never see their citizens fighting in Russia, or in any of these very people migrating to Europe through the illegal route. Why? Because high development index, good governance, prosperity, peace, security, and development are guaranteed. I think the counter strategy is this. African countries, Nigeria, Kenya, and the rest, must see how they can improve their Human Development Index, good governance, accountability, transparency, so that, peace and development can happen. Once we have that, our people will not be saying they will run out of the continent to Europe or to even go fight in Russia or Ukraine or to go to the Middle East. But at the moment, I think we don't want to address these root causes. Whatever thing we will do without addressing these root causes, issues of Human Development Index, good governance, and so on and so forth, we'll just be wasting our time.
Okay. Now, quickly in 1 minute, let's have your final thoughts as well, Single, especially if Kenya fails to secure a stop and return agreement with Moscow during this diplomatic mission. What is to stop another 1,000 young men from taking the same risk next month out of sheer desperation? Single?
Speak has, yeah, I'm saying nothing will be. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was saying nothing will stop another 1,000 or even more being trafficked in the same way these ones have been trafficked. And I want to say something else, which is that it must also be understood that because of the massive unemployment in the country right now, the government's policy is actually to export jobs. The Kenyan government's policy is to export jobs, and it has already entered into agreements with countries like Germany and some Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia for those countries to employ Kenyans, within a facilitated, negotiated framework by Kenya and those countries. So it then becomes easy when these recruitment agencies reach out to want to recruit Kenyans by also lying to them probably that this is also a government-sanctioned scheme for them to get jobs outside. So this unemployment problem is a bigger one. It's a big problem. So we have to fix it, and it has to be fixed by ensuring that the economy is functional, that systems are working, institutions are functional. Like, for example, when we had the government has revoked the registration of 600 of these recruitment agencies, we didn't hear what has been done to the airport officials and the immigration officials and the embassy officials who are implicated in this scheme. So there has to seem to be action being taken. Yeah. We have to enforce and institutionalize accountability. And so that if the governance is fixed, then perhaps some of these problems will be solved. But with the way things are, with the massive corruption, the massive unemployment, and the weak institutional framework that exists, it is difficult to deal with it.
All right, well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time and for speaking on this. Single Mwachofi, Deputy Director, Security Research and Information Center in Nairobi, Kenya. We also had Dr. Abubakar Mohammed Sani, Research Fellow, Department of Military Studies, Abuja Leadership Center in Borno State, and also Opina Ejanya, CEO 9 Communications Limited in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Thank you once again, gentlemen.